Hello, welcome back to my lab. With this video, what I want to do is get an introduction to doing some things that LiveNX reporting isn't necessarily really good at doing, really meant to do. And so this first one, putting an arbitrary number of reports in one report group consisting of different devices or sites, that's something that would be very difficult to do. So if you're looking at creating a report, you put in a report, flow applications. Let's just keep that as it is. And let's say we choose a device, and then we go on to choose the next device, go on to choose the next device. And you see, it's kind of time consuming, right? It's taken a few seconds, and this is just the fifth or sixth one. Not ideal. So we want to make this a lot better. And the way to do that is, of course, nominally through the API. So with that, you basically need to use some scripting skills. And you can use whatever language you want. I'm going to use Bash, but anything that can, Python, Perl, anything that you can use a loop with that can talk over APIs, all those fun protocols you can actually use to put these reports together. And in case I haven't said it, LiveNX isn't necessarily meant to have a large number of individual reports inside of a report group. If you put 50, 60, 100 reports inside of one report group, it's going to be a giant report. If you download it, export to PDF, it'll be tens, maybe hundreds of megabytes, and it could take a long time to generate, even reporting over just a couple hours of data. So keep that in mind. I don't know what it takes to crash a server, but it's possible, I imagine. So just keep that in mind when you get super ambitious about that. And while we're doing this, I want you to keep in mind the second portion of what I have in mind here. That is doing 8 to 24 reports, and I just put those as arbitrary numbers. But what I'm imagining is doing basically a report for every hour of a single day. And you can do these over individual hours inside the same report group so that when you generate the report, you can just scroll down the results and you can see, okay, here's 8 to 9 a.m., 9 to 10 a.m., 10 to 11 a.m. as you scroll down and see the differences between all of those. And again, it won't require any special manipulation, at least on the front end or the back end, depending on how you think of it. You will need to obviously manipulate it on the front end of making the report, but after the report's been generated, boom, it's all set up for you. So we're going to look at that. It's going to involve the same kind of thing. We're going to use a loop and iterate through. Basically use a variable or two for the time and just increase the time by those 86,400,000 millis each time. If we're, or no, because that'd be a day. It would be 3,600 seconds, or 3,600,000 milliseconds. So let's talk about the first one, at least getting lots of reports, one group, different devices or sites. I'm going to use basically the different devices because that's the most common one, I think, right? You're trying to report over different devices. And I think that like when you're trying to get a site report with applications, etc., it converts it to the device on the back end anyway. So when you're putting it in via the API, you need to know the device serial number, or at least the serial number that LiveNX thinks that it is. So let's pivot. Let me hide that window so that it's not so bright. And we'll get dark and down to business. I got this pulled up. In case you don't recall, this is on my LiveNX server in the file system. We go to /data LiveNX server data log, and inside of this directory, there is a file. There may be multiple files. And I'll get that vertically here. This is the REST API log. So it's this guy. Yesterday, when I made my last video, I had a file that was v22.1, the REST API log, and I deleted that because this is 22.3 and I just like to have current data. So when we're looking at it, we go, I like to use less. To get to the bottom of the file, we go Shift G, capital G, and the place that I want to look at is right here. I know that because it was at 1633. The time and date on this thing is wrong, and I don't care. So here we are. This is the important text. I made a report group that has 2 reports in it, just like yesterday. I basically ran the same report. And we're going to inspect it and see what we're going to do. So keep in mind that we want to imagine that we have 100 devices, and we want to put them all in the same report group. And of course, we're going to need to basically use a loop. This is going to involve 2 arrays because I've done this. So I'm basically going to recount. I just can't show the data that I used because that's proprietary. But so here's kind of the header of the log entry. But the first data that we're going to use in our loop starts here with curly brace, double quote, name. And it ends with, where we go, report description null. And as we learned yesterday, we could have a couple of new lines between each report. We could probably put them anywhere, and it won't matter. It'll go into the API just fine. And for consistency, we're going to get back up to here and put a new line at the first report ID as well. So we can illustrate that and understand that that's how that works. So we got that. Let's get to report description null. There's the end square brace. Here's the beginning square brace. Here's the end square brace. And this is the footer. Basically, that's what I call it. Like this is the header, and this is the footer. And then this particular entity, this element right here, that's what we loop over. I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to keep that up there for kind of reference. But we're going to imagine that this is what we want to use for our script. So what we're going to start with is this. And, well, what do we know? We know that the elements in this report that are going to be changing is going to be what? We got the report name and the, looking in here, device serial number. Potentially, it could also be the start and end time. That would be for the second type of report that I'm talking about with same device, different time ranges. But for this instance, we don't care about the start and end time. We can put this in with arbitrary times, and then it'll be fine to use the web UI to execute the report group. Whereas this particular kind of report that's using different time ranges, that you will need to execute with the API. So we've got, like I mentioned, the serial number needs to change, and then the report name, which is right here. I don't know why there's a line there. I'm just going to delete that line so that's easy to read. So report name. So that means we have two variables. Let me get rid of that new line as well. That'll be good. We have two variables. And since we have, it's going to be basically two arrays, we're going to use bash arrays. So the first variable is going to be the serial. I'm going to call this array serials. And to initialize a bash array, you go variable name equals beginning parentheses, and then your data, end parentheses. And when I am putting in arrays, I like to use the if and only if just to make sure that it gets defined and then it goes on to the next step. So we got serials, and then I'll call it report name, and that'll be the second array, second variable kind of thing. And the significance of this is that the serial number is going to go up here, report name is going to go down here, and you could have them be the same thing. Save yourself some work. And indeed, instead of having to use arrays, you could just go for I in data1, data2, data3, do, etc. But what that leaves you with is you have to have the serial be here. So if you want the report name to be the serial number, fine, but you're never going to know what that serial number corresponds to, like what host name or site. So that's why you want the report name. You could call the report name variable the site name or the device host name, etc. I'll just call it the report name for funsies. So for the purposes of this, I took this serial number, and I obviously don't have the next four that were manufactured, but I made them into their own little array. I just used Excel to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I did that. So another thing with arrays is sometimes you might want to put double quotes around each of these variable values. So that may be something you want to do. I don't know exactly how it works. I'm not a guru about that kind of stuff. I just kind of operate with this works or it doesn't. But I found that this works. I don't need the double quotes. However, generally, I do recommend using double quotes. I'm just going to be lazy right now, and I may not even use this. Obviously, I'm not going to use it because it has serial numbers that I don't possess. This will just be a good example. Anyway, so we got this. We got 5 of them, right? And then the report name, I'm just going to call this, each of these report names, site 1, site 2, site 3, site 4, site 5. Did something with my keyboard. Awesome. So we've got those arrays defined. I'm just going to say, don't proceed unless that works. It's going to work. And then we want to make a loop out of this. So just to review before we go on, we've defined the serials array and the report name array. And so we want to make sure that those are the names of the variables that we're using in this section. So there's going to be some special syntax that's associated with that. But we're going to say device serial, it's going to be serials. And again, we're going to change this, but just as a placeholder, I'm going to have that. Just go with me on it. Then report name is going to be value report name. So right now, man, it's already been 15 minutes. Might be a good time to get up, get a stretch. We're maybe halfway through. I don't know. I'm just kind of making this up on the fly. But this is your cue to hit pause and come back now. So just to recap one more time, we got serials, the report name, these are arrays, and now we need to define the loop, which can be interesting. So we got serials is that, report name is that, and then and I usually use for I in, and then there's some special array syntax. And you may not get this the first time that I explain it, but just Google how to do a bash array, for loop, things like that. Or a Python array and for loop, or whatever language you're using, because this functionality is integral to basically any language. I can't think of a single one that can't do loops. But in bash, the syntax for making a loop based off of an array is you got for I in value, curly brace, exclamation point, you go serials, and then left square brace at right square brace, right curly brace. Uh, my own personal headcanon is like for I in the entire array of serials and then each element one by one. So as you proceed through this loop, at becomes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the point of that is that whatever number this is, as it increments, it's also going to key into the number element of the report name array. So when serials is 0, it'll be element 0 of this array and element 0 of this array. I just noticed there's a space there. Let me take that out. And then when it loops back around, it'll be element number 1. And then it'll be here, the second element, and the second element there. So it's super cool. For I in that. And then do. And what this is doing, because I haven't mentioned it, this is just printing text. It's great. This is setting us up. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be printing text and then just slapping on the header and the footer, and then using that for the API call. But all that we're doing right here in setting this loop up is giving ourselves the body, the middle part, the changeable part of the API call. So if you want to think about it, what this is just preparation to do the API call. And it's kind of a lot of work, as you see. But again, like I demonstrated, even putting a report group of 5 or 6 individual reports will take you a few minutes. You can get 100 in there just with a little bit of preparation and have it succeed. Not to mention all the other advantages of this, like posterity. You can, like, I always save these giant API calls that I do. And that way, if something goes wrong, I can easily know what went wrong and maybe fix it, hopefully, if I didn't break anything huge. And then two, if I want to just do it again, just with maybe some different parameters, it's very easy to do that. So anyways, this is the first half of using arrays. The second half is the actual variable itself. So that's not the right syntax. The way to say, element at of each of these arrays is pretty similar, but you do need to do a little bit of extra work. So this is going to be $, and then left curly brace, serials. Oh, I lost my arrow key. And then left square brace, and then value of I. And I becomes at, if that makes sense. And then right square brace, right curly brace. And then the same deal for report name. We add a left curly brace, and then a left square brace, value of I, because that's the variable that I defined, no pun intended. And then right square brace, right curly brace. So we're almost done here, actually. We need to keep in mind that we're not just doing the report ID, we're doing echo this thing. And now, I hope this doesn't blow your mind, but we need to do something a little special. So I'm going to take this and open up a new notepad so that I can show you. With Bash, you need to escape some special characters. They may or may not be special, quote unquote, but they're special. So let me just get this back here. Copy that. Do echo report ID. Yep. Okay, cool. So it's already on its own line. Find. Oh, replace is Control H. What do we want to replace? And unfortunately, this doesn't use regular expressions. Otherwise, I do multiple things and take care of it all at the same time. But we need to replace, and I'm actually going to take out this stuff because some of that stuff might interfere. We need to escape the curly braces. We need to escape the quotes. And we don't need to escape the square braces, which is interesting. Or, in fact, the curly braces that the variables use. Because when you escape something like this, that means you want it to be taken literally. Whereas if you don't escape something, you mean that you want Bash to actually interpret it properly. So we want Bash to interpret the $sign, the curly brace, as the variable. But we don't want Bash to interpret this curly brace or this quote as being actual code. We just want them to be text. So when I do this replacement, I'll need to go back and unescape the variables. So we're taking a left curly brace and we're replacing it with an escaped left curly brace. We're taking a right curly brace, replacing with an escaped right curly brace. And then we're taking a double quote and replacing it with an escaped double quote. And again, like I said, we got to take our variables and unescape those curly braces. So we take this and copy it back. We're right here. So you see, we got our escapes, all that fun stuff. That's the end of that right there. Let me take out that space in case we don't want that. And the last thing that I gave it a quick look over, and we actually want a comma after this last curly brace so that it's more like this guy as opposed to this guy who didn't have a comma because it didn't need it because it is the last element. All of these that we're generating down here in this bottom section need to be like this one, except for the very last one. And then we'll take that output and just delete the final comma and put it in before the curly or the square brace. But I think this is going to work more or less. We're going to find out. Let me open up another Sigwin. I could do this on the LiveNX server that I have open. I just don't feel like it. That was very fast, right? There's just 5. Let's look at what we did. And that's super tiny. Let me make that a little bigger. Text, select. We're going to make this 14. There we go. So let's look at what we did. This was what we entered. That's the script. So this is the output. We're going to take that. Yeah, for some reason it inputted an extra line in there. That's why I like to use Notepad++, because Notepad++ would have told me straight up that there's a carriage return line feed in there, as opposed to me finding out right here. So I'm actually going to go back here and do this properly, just to make sure we have a good result. And that's the wrong notepad. Let me get back here. I figured there was just some line wrapping that was going on, but it also wasn't. Here we go. There's the done, that's the script, and then here's the output. Copy that, paste. Let me just see if there's, good, I just wanted to make sure. All right. So we get rid of that last comma. Notice all this fun stuff, right? Serial number, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the site 1, site 2, site 3, site 4, site 5. And it would have taken exactly that long if we had 10, 50, 100 devices that we had. As long as you take the time to set it up properly, then it works out. So this is about the end of the road for this part. We take the copy, put it back into this guy, and this becomes the body, as you recall. We have commas after each of these sections. So it just goes right here. And then we can take this from top to bottom and put it in the API. So we got, oh, that's right. I put the window over here. And like I said, this isn't going to work. I will put this in, and I'll tell you why. Is that I haven't shown a failure. So I just want to, oh, not post queue register, just post reports queue. Try it out. Select all, paste, just like we did before. Get my API key, copy, paste. And this is a failure. If you recall, we had a success yesterday. It starts, meta, href, etc. And it also had code 200, I think, for a success. Whereas this is a 500 response. Error request failed. And you see, it says the request failed. It doesn't tell you why. So it's not always the most helpful, but that's okay in this case because we know why it happened. So another fun thing. So like I said, I keep this text for posterity. I also keep the curl here. Notice when you click into this box, it just selects all the text automatically. I copy that and then I paste it. And I'm just gonna put a little thing there. Paste that in my, I use OneNote or Google Keep or something, and I just put that there. Another thing you may need is like curl KX in case you don't have a certificate, like I do in this, or like rather I don't also in this case, so I do need K. But yeah, that's how we would do that. I know that's the half-hour way of explaining it, and we still have just a little bit left to do on this. So if you need another break, go ahead and take it. And we're going to keep going. So now we're going to drill down the objective of different time ranges, right? We're going to imagine we want 8 different reports. We're going to use it. I don't know why I deleted that. But we've got this. We've got this guy. So what we're going to be doing is manipulating the start and end time. And you notice how these should be 360,000 milliseconds apart. Oh, actually, they aren't necessarily. I'm just kidding. I don't know if this is an hour. This is 15 minutes, right? This is probably 15 minutes. So this should be, what, 900,000 apart? No, I don't even know. They're slightly different numbers here. Doesn't matter though. The big part of this is we're basically going to be doing uh, initializing the variable. So start time equals, let's imagine that this is the start time. It's that. And there may be some numerical variable setting things that I'm forgetting. So like you may have to like set start time, etc. I maybe should experiment with this, but I really just want to build the bare bones out of this as a tag ending onto the first half hour of this video. So just go with me on this. So start time and end time. And what we'll do is end time is that plus 3,600,000. Yeah. And that may not be the right syntax, but whatever you need to do to get that plus that is what you do there. So then as we go, you go for I in 1 to 8. You notice what we're going to do. We're going to say basically the first one, start time equals initial start time plus I minus 1 times 360,000. And then the end time is approximately the same thing. Now, considering that we could actually, I hadn't thought about this before, but we could just do this. And then where we have start time equals value of start time multiplied by value of I minus 1. And again, that may not be the right terminology, but I'm just doing some whatever you call it, some pseudocode here. Start time equals that. End time equals value of end time times value of I. Oops, there we go. The reason for this is that you'll have this number minus or multiplied by I minus 1. So the first time it's, whoops, I forgot my math is just needs to do a little extra, plus 3,600,000 multiplied by I minus 1. And then end time is end time plus 3,600,000 times value of I. I probably need parentheses and things like that. But like I said, this is mostly pseudocode. So we do and, because we want to make sure that the math happens. And then here, start time, we're going to use value of start time. And end time is value of end time. Device serial is fine. And then the report name, I didn't plan this out ahead of time, but I think what we could do, for instance, is call this like the time, like the hour of the day. So we can do, say like this is 8 a.m. We could call this like 7 plus I a.m. Value of 7 plus value of I a.m. And then we could also even name it like 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., something like that, or like 0700 to 0800. That way you could use 24-hour time. I'm not going to worry too much about hacking that, but you see how it could easily be done. So we got this. That's all in there. This is, of course, going to be an echo, so we need the brackets escaped. Did we have that back here? We actually did kind of have it back here because it's that way in there. I don't necessarily trust it because, yeah, the brackets aren't escaped there. So if we were to escape all the brackets and the quotes, we would just have to unescape those guys. So that's not terrible. Control H for replace. You realize how much of my time, how much of my life I spend doing replacements. There are worse things. Cool. Oh, and great. That actually showed me an error that I made. That's hilarious. Because it didn't replace that because it was a parenthesis. Parenthesis? What's the singular of parentheses? Who even knows? So we've got that. And I'm going to try and execute this. It's going to give me mad syntax errors though. So I barely even want to try. But I like to give things college tries. Okay. Yeah, I didn't get it to work. I would just need a little extra work. I just wanted to make the point of that's how you would do it. So once you have that, you have all those reports with the different start and end times, put them in here, and then bam, you can do it however and whenever you want. Now keep in mind, you may not be able to schedule that report to be recurring, but maybe you can. Let's take a quick look at if we can schedule those weird reports to be recurring. So we go to reports, view reports, and yeah, let's take a quick look at this guy. So I have one recurring report. I'm going to clone that so it has a few different reports inside of it. Update the template. And then we're going to look in the REST API documentation for report schedule, get report schedule groups. How am I here already? I think I was looking at it earlier. And we're going to take a look at this. So I only have one schedule report. So that's how it makes this nice to parse. And we see group ID, no sharing config. The important part is the reports. So look at it, name, the time specification can be the same. It's not too big a deal. But I think, yeah, you can't make this recurring without doing like a cron job from from the Linux backend or something like that, because when it does the report by default, it's going to do whatever you define in the web UI. In this case, Sunday through Saturday. This is where the time definition comes from. And whatever time definitions you have in here don't matter at all. It's going to keep saying this until the end of time, and just going to use this for its time range definitions. Anyways, I've really overstayed my welcome on this video. We're at 40 minutes. So if you've stuck in there with me, I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Let me know if you have any questions.